What's up everyone? Today we'll be creating a C# program to interface with the SQL Server Database that we set up in a previous video. So let's get to it. To get started, we'll fire up Visual Studio here, and we will be creating an empty web application project on the .NET framework. So click on Create a New Project, and then in the search bar, type in web application. Web application, and then you should see an ASP.NET web application on the .NET framework. So this is in C#. So click on that and then click Next. And for the project name, I'm going to name it petsdb_client. And I'm going to make a empty application. So it's just a bare bones ASP.NET web app. So I'll click Create, and now Visual Studio will create the project for me. So now we need to add a web form to the project. So the way that we do this is by clicking on or hovering over the petsdb, the project, and then hovering over Add, and then adding a new item. Then we will do, in the search bar, type in web space form, web form, and I'm just going to leave it as the default name, webform1.aspx, and then click Add. So this adds an ASPX and ASPX.cs and ASPX.designer.cs files to the project. So we also need to add jQuery. In particular, we will be adding jQuery 1.11.2. So jQuery is a client-side JavaScript library for web page development. It provides methods for AJAX functionality, and in particular, it allows us to load external data like from our database directly into the selected HTML elements of our web page. So that's crucial for the functionality of this client. So we will need to add the jQuery 1.11.2 library to this project. So the way that I'm going to do this is by opening up a web browser and then typing in download jQuery 1.11.2, and then I found it on this blog.jquery.com. I will post the link to this in the description. And then if you click on this link to the jQuery 1.11.2.js file, you'll see just the text of the file. This is just, the code for the library. So I'm going to highlight all of that and then copy it, and then open up Notepad and paste it, and then press File, Save As, and then I'm going to be saving it into the repo. So that would be petsdb client. Save it right along with all the other code, or all the other files, I'm sorry. And we save that as jQuery 1.11.2.js, and then be sure in the save as types, just put it as all files, and then press save. And now, when we go back to our Visual Studio, we will highlight the project, right click, add existing item, and we should see jQuery.js file, and then we double click that, and now we have jQuery 1.11.2.js added to the project. Now we need to add a class for our pets, or a pet class I should say. So highlight the project, go to add new item, and then search. In the search bar, I'm going to type in class and name it pet.cs. Click add, And now we want to basically just create the same information that we had in our database, but in this class here. So we'll make a public int ID, and it's get set commands, a string for the name of the pet, a string for the species of the pet, and an int for the age of the pet. So that does it for the pets class. Next, we will be working with our web form.aspx.cs file. So the first thing that we need to do is add two namespaces. We'll be adding system.data and system.data.sql client. Now we need to create a method to get our pet by its ID. So the first thing we're going to need to do is specify the web method attribute. The way that we do this is by putting in brackets system.web.services.web-method. Next, we declare the method. So public static, it is crucial that you declare it as static. I'll declare it, public static pet get pet by ID is the name of the method, and it accepts an argument of integer, the pet ID. So now we need to create a new pet. So pet equals new pet. So create a new instance of the pet class. And now we need to make our connection string. So our con string equals, this part's a little bit difficult syntax, but basically it's just doing what we did when we set up the SQL server. So server is dot, so localhost, and then we specify the database as our pets DB that we set up in the previous video. And then we say integrated security equals SSPI. Now we need to create our SQL command for fetching the pet, corresponding to the ID that's passed as an integer. So we'll say using SQL connection con, which is a new SQL connection, passing the argument of our connection string. We will now create our SQL command. So our SQL command, named command, equals new, and it's a new instance of SQL command, and it is the stored procedure that we wrote in the previous video. So sp get pets by ID. That was the stored procedure name of, that we specified in the previous video. And we'll also pass our connection object. So our command type is a stored procedure. So we do have to specify this. And then we also need to add the parameters of the command. So we do this by creating a new SQL parameter object and then specifying the parameter name, which is @ID. So this also comes from the stored procedure that we wrote in SQL Server. When we put in, @ID, we need to then use the same characters here in our C#. Then we can also pass the value which is the pet ID that we passed as an argument to this function. So that is the command parameters. Now we want to open our connection, and we need to be able to read the data from our database. So we do this by executing a reader. So we execute reader with our command, and then this is basically how we read the data into our object, our pet object. So while SQL reader dot read pet ID pet dot ID equals convert to int32 SQL reader, and then we can actually index the reader. So we want the ID, so we indexed the response as the ID, and then pet dot name equals convert. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't need to convert that, it's already string. So SQL reader index name dot toString pet dot species equals SQL reader index species dot toString, and pet dot age equals SQL reader indexed age dot toString. Oops, this is an integer, so I need to convert dot to int32 SQL reader index age. And now we just have to return the pet. So return pet outside of this using statement here, we return the pet. So now we just have to work on our web form .aspx. So let's open up that file. So the first thing that we're gonna do is add a table, just so we can output our data to something. So this part, I take no offense if you want to skip through it, but I will be talking a little bit about why we do each of these elements. So the first thing we're going to do is an input for the input ID. So this is just a text box for the user to enter their information, or enter the ID that they wish to get information on, the pet that they want to get the information on. So I say style equals width, and I want to make it 100 pixels here. Oops, I did one too many quotations there. Here we go. Next, we're going to do another input, and this will be a button, and its ID is button get pet. And the value, so this is like the text that you'd see with it, I'm going to put get pet information. Now, just do a couple of line breaks just to make it look better. And now we're going to make our table. So we say table, let's give it a border and style it a little bit. So I'll say border, style equals border block, and let's say groove. And now for the table row, the first table row, it will be for the name. So table data name, and then the actual, let's see here, the input will be, it'll come back from the database, right? The name will be retrieved from the database. So I'm going to specify this ID as output name, and the type is text. Not tel, text. There we go. And now we need to do another table row for the species. So table data, another input, ID equals output species, type equals text, and don't forget to close off the inputs. I forgot to do it up here. Close that, and one more row for the age, and this will be another input, ID equals output age, and the type is text. Just like that. So that does it for the table, the HTML for the table. Now we just need to do our jQuery and AJAX. All right, so at this point, we're ready to write our jQuery and AJAX code to populate the table that we created down below. So the first thing that I'm going to do is specify a title for this page. I'm going to name it My Pet Database Client. Next, we're going to make the script, or link our jQuery script. So we say script source equals jQuery 1.11.2.js. And now we're going to make another script element, and this will be where we put our jQuery and AJAX code into. So text, JavaScript, and now we say, so documents dot ready. So when the document is ready, we'll have this callback function ready to go. So we want to create a variable. No, actually we first want to know when the user clicks this button, the button get pet. So the way that we do this is by saying button get pet dot click. So an event handler for when it's clicked. We then make a callback function, and we want to create a variable called pet ID, and we want to set this equal to the value that the user input to this text box, the ID text box. So we'll set that equal to input ID dot value. And now we want to write a little bit of AJAX. So we'll say AJAX, and we specify the URL. So the URL we get, we name it, so it's the web form 1, and then .aspx, and then a /, and then the function that you want it to call. So in this case, we want it to call get pet by ID. So we do web form 1 .aspx / get pet by ID. Next, we want to specify the method as post, because we're posting the information to the table. The content type is application / JSON. Next is the data. So the data, you can either use like a JSONify function, or you can just write the data in JSON. So that's what I'm going to do here. So it's pet ID, and that is coming from our function here, pet ID, and then a colon, and then we do the pet ID variable that we declared in this function, and then our closing curly brace. We want to specify the data type as being JSON, and we want to create a successful onSuccess callback function. So we'll pass in the data of that response, and then we want to populate our table. So we say the output name is going to be the value of the data response, and then the D is the object, and then we need to use the exact same information as from the pets class. So we want it to be name, species, and then I screwed up age here. Well, just kind of. I made a capital G, so I will have to make a capital G down here. Otherwise, it won't work. So here we'll do output species dot value as the data dot d dot species. And then here's where I screwed up a little bit, but it kind of does help because now you can see. So here I am, I'm specifying HTML elements. So I spelled it right there. So output age, and then the value is data.d.a capital G E. And then that does it for the success. And then we'll also create an error callback function. So in this case, we're just going to throw the error, alert the error so we can see potentially what happened. And at this point, the jQuery and AJAX is ready to go. So I'll run this program. It will pop up in Google Chrome because that's my default browser. And when I put in the ID of 1, I'm hoping to get a response of Wrinkly's information. So I put in 1, get pet information, and there we have it. I have Wrinkly, dog, age 7. If I put in 2, I should be getting Michael. And 3 would be Rocky. So at this point, this is a working client for our SQL server that we had set up in a previous video. That does it for this video. I will be posting the code that I wrote in this project to a GitHub repository, so you can find the link in the description down below if you want to copy that into your own project rather than writing it yourself. If you want to get in contact with me, maybe you have questions, comments, or suggestions, I encourage you to join my Discord server. The link will be in the description down below. If you like the content of this video, please consider liking and subscribing so that I know that you support my channel. And as always, thank you for watching and stay safe, everybody.